Zach Thomas is coming in. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I think we have a few more that are still coming in, but we should be good to go. And I'll note their time they come in.
All right. Well, with that, I will call the January 26, 2022 meeting of the Johnson County Charter Commission, which we have usually dubbed the 2021 Charter Commission. I guess it's a 2021/2022 Charter Commission, as we wrap up our work here in the early month, January and February of 2022. I'm Greg Musil, the chair of the commission. Linda, Deputy Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Wendy Bingesser,
Wendy Bingesser present.
Mike Boehm,
Mike Boehm here.
Karen Brownlee.
Karen Bradley here.
Thank you. Vicki Charlesworth,
Vicki Charlesworth present.
Jim Denning,
Jim Denning here.
Jane Dirks,
Jane Dirks here.
Jimmy Gaona, Jimmy Gaona,
To unmute.
Mr. Gaona, could you unmute?
I think it's *6.
*6, please.
Jimmy Gannon present.
Thank you. Tedrick Housh,
Tedrick Housh present.
Randy Hutchins,
Randy Hutchins present.
Chris Iliff. Chris Iliff. I do not think he's on at this time. I'll come back to him. Mark him absent. Laura Clinging Smith,
Laura Clinging Smith present.
Joy Costin,
Joy Costin present.
Brent McCune is absent tonight. Eric Michelson,
Eric Michelson present.
thank you. Ed Peterson,
Ed Peterson present.
Don Rattan,
Present.
okay. Thank you, Don. You were a little, had a little issue with your sound. Leslie Riverola,
Leslie Riverola is present. Thank you.
Don Roberts,
Don Roberts present.
Kyle Russell,
Kyle Russell present.
Paula Schwach,
Paula Schwach present.
Brenda Sharp,
Brenda Sharp present.
Greg Shelton is absent tonight. Greg Smith,
Here.
Zach Thomas,
Zach Thomas here.
and Chairman Musil. Chair, can you unmute?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, thank you. And I'll watch for Chris Iliff to come into the meeting.
I know you're counting, Linda, but I'm going to declare the presence of a quorum. I am sure that we have more than 13 people here. So we'll move on. We are a virtual only meeting tonight. I will again, for those who are watching this, explain the Charter Commission process. Every 10 years under the Johnson County Home Rule Charter, a Charter Commission made up of 25 volunteers is appointed by various groups to review the organization, structure, and administration of Johnson County's government. A Charter Commission has the authority to place items on the ballot for voters to vote on with 13 votes. That if a proposal receives 13 votes, it would then be on the ballot the next November election in even numbered years. And the Charter Commission also has the opportunity to make recommendations, non-binding recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners. Through our process over the last 10 months, we have entertained originally 15 different amendments. None of the amendments received 13 votes to be placed on the November 2022 ballot. We're down now to the point of considering 4 recommendations that have been submitted and a 5th recommendation that has been proposed as well. After those votes, we will be moving toward a final report to the Board of County Commissioners. And we'll discuss that process at the end of today's meeting. The first item on the agenda is to consider approval of today's agenda. Are there any comments or questions about today's agenda or a motion to approve the agenda as published? And if
We'll
you
move to
speak,
approve the agenda as published. This is Mayor Schwak.
thank you, Mayor Schwak. I was going to say, when you speak, identify yourself by name so we can record it in the minutes. Mayor Schwak has made the motion. Is there a second?
Wendy Bingesser seconds.
Commissioner Bengesser seconds. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion or questions before we vote?
Chair, can I ask, were you talking about the minutes or are we voting on the January 26th tonight's agenda?
Agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving tonight's agenda as published, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries without objection. The second item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the January 10, 2022 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes anyone has identified or would like to discuss?
Mr. Chair, Brenda Sharp moves approval.
Is there a second?
Tedrick Couch, second.
Moved by Commissioner Sharp and seconded by Commissioner House to approve the minutes of the January 10 meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Minutes are approved without objection. There's no old business to come before the group. Our new business is the first item listed is proposed recommendations for final votes. The 4 recommendations that have been placed on the agenda and are in your agenda packet have all been discussed in the past. However, there have been some revisions or tweaks to those. So I'm going to allow some time on each of those. Hopefully just a couple minutes for each proponent to go through those. And then if there is any brief discussion on those before we vote. The first proposed recommendation is by Commissioner Hutchins to reorganize subcommissions not currently under the direct control of elected county commissioners and the Charter Commission to a structure that is. And Randy, I know that, Linda, can you place the revised recommendation on the screen? This is the one on the subcommissions and subcommittees, not the unincorporated. Okay, it is on the screen for the commission and for those watching. Commissioner Hutchins,
Okay. Linda, am I okay to go ahead and share my presentation I put together for the team to briefly walk them through the discussion here?
We are stopped sharing ours, so now you should be able to share your screen.
Thank you. All right, can everyone see my presentation?
No,
No.
it is on the screen now. You just need to start your PowerPoint, the slideshow.
Very good.
It's good, Randy.
Very good. So thank you guys for allowing me the opportunity to share this with you. If you recall previous meeting, there were some good questions, and quite frankly, I wasn't prepared to go into this in detail due to the time I was spending up to the last minute preparing the other one on the unincorporated area, which we'll review in a little bit. So I took the action to work with staff and some other commissioners to get more details around this. So I just put together a brief presentation to walk you through our learnings and get to the, based on those learnings, what we believe the final recommendation should be. So just some quick facts. So there are 32 different boards, commissions, committees, or councils in Johnson County that help govern the different aspects of the business. All those, one thing I did learn is all those appointments are made by the chair or the district commissioners. So as well as those appointees are available for comment during the normal board of county commissioners meetings. So bottom line is, would they make all the direct appointments to those committees? The appointment terms are indicated in the parentheses by each committee that we'll see following this slide. And you'll notice that they do vary. All the meetings are open to the public on the 32 different boards and commissions. So the public is invited. It's published on the website, I believe, with the exception of the fire districts and the non-Johnson County committees. The county member contact information is made available on the county websites. And the committees not required by the state statutes are noted in asterisks. So just to reiterate, there are some committees that are required by state statutes that are not indicated with the asterisks. So the first is the fire district boards. There's 3 fire district boards that you can see here. If we move into the Johnson County agencies, you'll see the Park and Recs, which are 3-year terms. The library, of which is 4-year terms. The developmental supports, 3 years, and then the airport commissions following in that agency category as well on 3-year terms. Then we have the planning, housing, and community development boards and commissions. So this is where you see your codes reviews, your zoning boards, your planning and development, and your housing community in here. So you will note that there are in fact some items in here that are not dictated by state statute that are indicated in the asterisks. The other thing you can note is the terms of nomination do vary. We move into the public safety category. You can see these civil boards, community corrections, criminal justice advisory boards, and then the juvenile correction advisories as well, and their terms. And then moving into the infrastructure committees, again, solid waste, transportation, wastewater. And then we have the infrastructure committees and councils. Then your health and human service boards. Arts and culture commissions, councils. Then your general government groups. And then the non-Johnson County committees of which we appoint. So the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City, which obviously goes beyond Johnson County. The Reach Community Advisory Boards, the 10th Judicial District Nominating Committee, and then the Johnson County Townships, which are elected positions. So as you guys can see, there are a lot of different boards, commissions within the county. They vary in terms of terms, and some are required by state statute, some are not. So leading to the new recommendation based on these learnings is the Board of County Commissions shall review the 32 Johnson County boards, commissions, committee, and councils, looking at ways to consolidate, to number one, standardize ways of working. And that would include the terms and assignments, which they are assigned. Consolidate to streamline county operations to improve transparency to the public, and also increase and look for ways to increase accountability to the voters. So as we heard Chairman Eilert mention previously that the subcommittees would be out of scope. Actually, that's not correct. They are actually in direct scope of the preview of the county commissioners and should be within the scope of this charter commission. So actually that was goodness. That was good news for me, which has led to the updated recommendation for the subcommissions. So with that being said, we'll open it up for questions.
Remind everybody, these are recommendations, non-binding to the Board of County Commissioners. As with the amendments, it would require 13 votes. If any of these recommendations receive 13 votes, they will be included as recommendations in the final Charter Commission report. Is there anybody that would like to comment on the proposed recommendation that Randy just described? Brenda Sharp,
Mr. Chair.
you're probably just going to have to jump in because I can't see everybody, but Brenda, you happen to be on my screen, so please go ahead.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Randy. I just wanted to call attention to the appointments referencing the Healthcare Foundation of Greater Kansas City and Reach Healthcare Foundation's Community Advisory Committees. These are appointment structures that were derived based on a legal settlement reached between Johnson County District Court, the Attorney General of Kansas, HCA, and Health Midwest back in 2003. They are not subject, from my understanding, to be changed or moved or modified in any way by the Johnson County Commission, and they are appointments that are made by the commission as a whole. So, and because I am directly involved with the Reach Healthcare Foundation, I will be abstaining from this vote because I think it's a conflict of interest, but I just wanted to provide some clarifying remarks there that it's a little unusual. This is kind of an odd one, and it wasn't anything we dreamed up. This was all the lawyers that were involved in that particular settlement agreement 2 decades ago.
Brenda, give some thought to whether we want to handle that particular one separately so you can participate in the rest of the commissions, and we can see how the discussion goes, but offer you that opportunity.
Okay.
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Boehm speaking. I can't
Please.
tell either. Randy, thanks for the information. Maury, are you here or someone from county staff? Because I'm going to direct this question at you. Of that
Maury,
list,
yes. Maury
of
is not with us today. Cindy Dunham is, and Linda, obviously, so maybe they can answer your question.
okay, of that list of boards and appointments, do any of them have any final authority other than advisory capacity? I think library and parks may, but I think it still goes to the county commission for final actions. But do any of those boards have any real authority in the end, or are they all advisory in nature?
Cindy Dunham from the County Legal Department. There would be, like you just mentioned, Park and Library, Airport Commission, I would say JCDS also. Basically, the statutory agencies would have some level of authority. But of course, as already noted, the county commissioners are the ones that appoint the members. And then there's a number of statutory requirements for each one of those governing agencies as to when what matters have to come to the board. So the answer to your question is mostly yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Coaston.
Thank you, Chairman Musil. Could you just clarify, Randy, what is the point of listing these 32 boards and commissions, and how does that relate to what you're trying to accomplish in your recommendation? I guess I'm a little confused as to why Commissioner Sharp would abstain from the vote, and what are we proposing to do with these other commissions?
Yeah, so my understanding was that these commissions were not under the direct control of our elected county commissioners. Since working with, the county department, and they provided this information to me, it is clear that they are in fact under the direct control of the county commissioners. In fact, the county commissioners are the ones, for the most part, and Chair Eiler are in fact appointing members of this. So that was actually encouraging for me. So as the discussion developed amongst staff as well as other commissioners, it really become a discussion. Okay, what can we do better in this space? And that's where they thought it'd be good to take a look at all 32, determine if they were all necessary. Was there opportunities to consolidate? Was there opportunities to make it more efficient? Should we look at the ones that they are able to change in terms? Does it make sense to standardize the county appointment in the way, in fact, the people do get appointed? So I guess my recommendation and my mindset changed as we learned a lot more about this to the recommendation I just put forward. So to me, it's more about standardizing and efficiencies, but more so than accountability for people.
Well, if I could just interject, it does seem like a fairly large shift late in the game in terms of looking at 32 commissions and trying to restructure all of that. So I'm just a little curious as to why that would be brought forward at this late stage.
And to be clear, the recommendation is for the county commissioners, the Board of County Commissioners to evaluate that.
I see. Okay.
It's not for this commission, it's for the Board of County Commissioners.
So you're recommending that the Board of County Commissioners take a look at all 32 agencies. That is the recommendation.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Other comments?
This is Tedrick Hausch.
Please
I was,
go ahead.
if we had a more specific idea of inefficiencies that have been identified that we've been able to discuss, I might be willing to consider some of this, but is just saying, let's get, hey, Board of County Commissioners, look at all 32 and try to find some efficiencies. It's such a general sort of recommendation for efficiency that they probably already have in their minds. It's a little bit like Emil Faber, knowledge is good. I think that it's probably not necessary for us to urge this upon them.
Other comments from the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, this is Leslie Riverola. As I have said previously, when this wasn't a recommendation, I am on the Parks Board. I am an appointed member on the Parks Board. I have been on the Parks Board for 6 years. I don't plan to abstain from this vote. I don't think that's a conflict of interest. But I do not support this. And I think there is plenty on the plate of the County Commission without adding this to their list. So I am completely opposed to this recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner. How about Commissioner Peterson?
Thank you. I think this in a generic sense sounds like a good idea, but there is adequate pressure at all times on the Board of County Commissioners to continually reassess these boards. And particularly if you look at the current composition of the county commissioners, almost all of them are dedicated to finding efficiencies in government, maybe the main reason they're serving. Then when you look at these various boards, there is a great disparity in what they do, the agencies they're advising. And I just think sort of in this broad sense of, well, let's have the BOCC find some efficiencies. It's not clearly enough defined, and I agree with Commissioner Housh that without further definition, I don't see this recommendation as being really helpful. So I'll be voting against it.
Other comments from commissioners?
Mayor Mike Boehm, or I guess I'm Commissioner Mike Boehm tonight, sorry. This is just looking for something that all the people are accountable to the elected officials already. All the budgets that they influence are voted on and controlled ultimately by the elected officials, not the committees and agencies. There's plenty on their plate right now, and as Commissioner Peterson said, we've got folks out there right now always looking to do things better. We have a staff that has that as one of their primary objectives as well. I don't see this as necessary. It's within the county commission's authority to take on these tasks if they see inefficiencies now. I'm not sure why we need a recommendation, so I will vote no.
Other
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr.
go ahead.
Chair, Kyle Russell, I just did not want it to go unsaid, much like Commissioner Riverola. I'm a member of the JCDS board. I do not, I don't benefit financially from that. I don't see any conflict of interest, and it's a minor part of this. So I was not planning to abstain, but I did not want it to go unsaid or undisclosed that I'm a member of that board.
There's a negative economic consequence from being on all those boards, probably.
Very much so.
Thank you all for serving on them. I'll make a couple quick comments. I don't think this is necessary. I don't think you can standardize the ways all of these different entities work. I suppose you could make them all the same terms, assuming the statutory bodies have the same terms. They're already transparent to the public because they're on the website. Their members are disclosed, their members are approved by the county commission, and their meetings are publicized. And they're all accountable to the voters through the Board of County Commission member that appoints them. So I don't see that these are any recommendations for change. And frankly, the number of boards doesn't bother me because I appreciate Randy going through all of them. They all have very different tasks. The ones that aren't statutory, we have a criminal justice advisory committee that is unique, I think, or was unique to Johnson County. We don't have to have that, but it gets more citizens involved in more ways on important issues. And I think that's the same thing with multiple planning commissions. We could have one county planning commission, and instead we have three, so that different portions of the county are represented, more citizens are involved. I don't see a need for this, and so I will be voting no. Are there other comments?
Mr. Chair, can you address the question then of conflict of interest? Because I would like to vote on this, but I felt it necessary to disclose that, and there's absolutely nothing the county can do about it, about those appointments. It's what they were handed. I'm sure staff would love for it to go away, but it's what was handed to them by the Attorney General.
I don't pretend to advise you on your individual view of conflict of interest, but I don't see a conflict of interest as a volunteer charter commission member voting on a broad issue like this, just because you or others may be a member of a specific group that's identified.
Okay, and just in the spirit of full disclosure, they are advisory only. They do not oversee or direct the allocation of our funds, nor do they influence hiring, firing decisions or compensation of my position. That's solely left to the Board of Directors.
Thank you for that clarification. There are no other comments. I will ask Deputy Clerk Sater to call the roll. If you support forwarding this recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, vote yes. If you do not favor that, please vote no, and we will count the vote at the end. Linda?
Wendy Bingesser,
Wendy Bingesser, no.
Mike Boehm,
Mike Bain, no.
Karen Brownlee,
Brownlee, no.
Vicky Charlesworth,
Vicky Charlesworth, no.
Jim Denning,
Jim Denny, no.
Jane Dirks,
Jane Dirks, no.
Jimmy Gaona,
Jimmy Gaona, no.
Tedrick Hausch,
Tedrick Hausch, no.
Randy Hutchins,
Yes.
Laura Klingensmith,
Laura Klinging Smith, no.
Joy Costin,
Joy Costin, no.
Eric Michelson,
No.
Ed Peterson,
Peterson, no.
Don Rattan,
Dawn Ratan is no.
Leslie Riverola,
Leslie Riverola is no.
Don Roberts,
Don Roberts, no.
Kyle Russell,
Kyle Russell, no.
Paula Swatch,
Paula Schwank, no.
Brenda Sharp,
Brenda Sharp, no.
Greg Smith,
Greg Smith, no.
Zach Thomas,
Zach Thomas, no.
Chair Musel,
Chair votes no.
Chair, I have 1 yes and 21 noes.
That recommendation fails. We'll move to the next one, which is by Commissioner Brownlee. And Karen has tweaked this. So Karen, if you would explain what you are trying to accomplish here. And I also want to identify, everybody received an email late this afternoon from Rick Walker of DeSoto regarding this, and we can place that on the board after Karen explains her recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did submit this recommendation back in the fall. I think the deadline was about November 1st. And then after that date, the city of DeSoto did a significant annexation. So I appreciated Captain Maxton of the Northwest Consolidated Fire District providing me the information of that annexation. And so then I removed that reference in this recommendation that there just be continued effort to move forward on consolidation of rural fire districts in Johnson County. And it's been what was commented to me by one person involved in this area is that it would be a worthy goal to achieve standardization of service for Johnson County residents. What does that mean? That would mean, number one, staffing, the number of personnel per pumper trucks. Number two, it would be the medical care and the level of medical care. There's basic life support that is supported by EMTs or the advanced, which is provided by paramedics. And most do provide that level of support. Typically, a fire truck will arrive on the scene before an ambulance does. So that's why that training by the paramedics is key, because they would be the ones that would provide that initial medical care. The third thing would be training levels and certifications. So that would be a worthy thing for those highest levels of certification to occur. And currently we do well in that area in Johnson County. There's also the ISO ratings, which are the Insurance Service Office ratings that, of course, it's more difficult for a rural district to achieve that because of the distance that they have to cover. And the fire hydrants are not as plentiful in those districts. But so the effort is to provide quality service and to do so without duplication. And I would be glad to try to answer questions. And I would comment too, and I did put this in an email, commend Commissioner Shirley Allenbrand for the work that she has done in this area. So it basically would be an endorsement that this is the work that has been done, and it's a good thing to continue.
And Commissioner Bradley, is this directed then only at service provided by the consolidated fire districts, or is this broader to engage cooperation and consolidation with individual cities' fire protection? I don't know how it breaks down, so that's why I was asking.
That's a good question. And I realize that not all the fire districts are rural, and if they are somewhat rural, they can still be quite a mix in what they cover. It can still be residential, industrial, et cetera, depending on the area, the county. So I think the key is just that those who are evaluating these services figure out the best way to do it. The most recent one was done in the fall, and that's where that rural fire district is contracting with the city of Overland Park for their services. And apparently that has been a positive move in the right direction from what I have gleaned.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson, I see your hand, and then anybody, and then Commissioner Sharp.
Question for Commissioner Brownlee. Are you intending to include the Consolidated Fire District number 2, which serves Northeast Johnson County, which is not rural in any capacity? It's entirely serving a variety of municipalities in the Northeast.
It is my understanding that that one is probably set and not in need of changes. That's what I've gleaned.
Well, I'd concur with that assessment as to that particular district. And I also, I applaud the effort. I think these rural districts are historical animals that need as much help as we can give them to be able to provide adequate service out there. So I applaud this, and I see no harm in encouraging continued conversations. It is a daunting task given the disparities in tax base, levels of service, and so forth. But I see no harm in encouraging continued discussion.
Thank you. And I purposely made this very simple. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm an expert on it. And I think that those who have worked on it, it would be good if they continue because they have developed the expertise that's necessary.
Commissioner Sharp?
Thank you. Commissioner Brownlee, I was just curious, is there a concern that without this recommendation, this work will stall, or is there opposition to this recommendation? It seems pretty straightforward and common sense. And I just wondered about, kind of like we talked to the last one, is it necessary at this time in your mind?
I think it's a good idea. Hopefully the work would move forward anyway. So I would yield to the discernment of each of the commissioners, but I think it's a good thing to endorse what has been done and encourage continued movement.
Other commissioners who are not on my screen,
Mr. Chair, Mike Boehm.
please go ahead, Mike.
I'm not familiar with this item. are these all contiguous or are they separated by existing city or consolidated fire districts? Again, I think that the purpose of the recommendation is lofty and a good. I think the fact that we've just recently had one consolidate with Overland Park to provide services with assistance from the county and the fire department in Overland Park, but not a mandate that these will continue to happen as necessary. With fire being dispatched centrally already, we are responding in the city of Lenexa to our neighbors, sometimes as first responders, just based on location and ease of access. So I think with dispatch, it's kind of working anyway. I don't know who pays for consolidated, if it's the countywide tax or if it's the districts themselves. If it's districts themselves, I have less concern, but if this is a county provided service that the county budget in total is going to upgrade these, when those of us who have city fire departments and coverage are now subsidizing those programs, I don't think that's appropriate. I just don't have enough information to know. Again, I think this is one of those that not only has it been done already without our encouragement, but it's another thing to just pile on to the board that probably isn't needed or necessary and doesn't necessarily need our recommendation. I don't have enough information to answer my questions, though.
I believe the current taxing structure would stay in place. And I believe that's, well, maybe I shouldn't say, but I was going to comment on the most recent one, but I don't want to get it wrong, so I just won't comment. But I believe the current taxing structure would stay in place. But again, that's where those who have the expertise would make those decisions. And I was not trying to make those decisions for them.
Commissioner Michelson.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess my hesitation in the sort of confessed absence of expertise on this issue here in this group. I mean, I don't see any harm in talking about this, but the recommendation is for a specific action item to move forward with consolidation. And I don't know enough to know whether that's generally a good idea. I imagine there is a counter argument, at least in some cases, where consolidation maybe has some cons. And I'm just not familiar enough with the issues, and I would love to hear from experts if we had time. I'm not sure we do, and then make my judgment. It may be a good idea, but this is definitely a policy recommendation beyond just looking at it. This is recommending that we consolidate. And again, I hear the efficiency arguments. I'm sure there are some advantages to doing that, but I just don't feel like I'm comfortable enough with an independent weighing of the cost benefits here to make that determination yet.
And I understand that, and talking to Captain or Chief Francis, I understand that there are some efficiencies to be gained by continuing to move in this direction. Apparently, decades ago, we had many, many more fire districts, about 24 fire districts. And so I know from his perspective that the county has moved in the right direction to where now we do have 8 fire districts or 8 fire departments. And so his sense was that this has been good movement or a step in the right direction.
That, I don't know if Linda or Cindy can answer this, but I'm going back to Randy's presentation that said we had 3 fire district boards for Fire District 1, Consolidated Fire District 2, and Northwest Consolidated Fire District 3. Are there multiple other consolidated fire districts in the county? I guess number 2 is up in the northeast part, probably covers Mayor Michelson City and some others up there. But
this is Cindy Dunham. There's 4 four fire districts, as you've already said. The consolidated covers are not considered a rural fire district. The other three would be more in the rural fire districts.
Thank you.
But they also, I should add, they also do cover portions of other cities.
Other comments from commissioners?
Chair Musil, this is Tedrick House. I would just briefly state, I think this is like the last one we just voted on in some sense. It's more narrow in that it's focused on the issue of consolidation of rural fire districts, but it doesn't address the case by case kind of analysis that Mayor Michelson made reference to. Also, just in terms of looking into this and researching it, we did hear back from Commissioner Allenbrand, and I think while she appreciated the concern about the issue, she said, quote, "But we are already working towards these efforts. We successfully already completed several, and I would be more than happy to discuss. Chief Francis and Deputy Thompson have led the way. We are lucky to have such outstanding leaders," end quote, at least in an email based on our inquiry. And so I think, again, the issue of inherency, if we're moving towards the solution and working towards this already, I don't know that our somewhat uneducated opinion would be of much help.
Other comments? My only comment would be, Karen, that under the purpose you had achieved standardization of service. And I think that's our aspirational goal. But if we have one house per half mile in the rural parts of the county, we're never going to standardize the service in a cost-effective way. So I do appreciate what I understand Commissioner Allenbrand has done so far and is continuing to do. And I guess I'm trying to figure out if this charter commission's role is to give an attaboy or an attagirl to continue doing it. I think she's going to continue it whether we do it or not. So any final comments?
I would say thank you all for considering this, and I appreciate the discussion and tried to get some answers, but obviously could not provide all of the answers. But thank you for your consideration.
We know that Charter Commission 2031 needs to include rural fire districts in their County 101 process, Karen, because you
Yes.
brought up issues and questions that we didn't really attempt to address earlier. So thank you for that. With that, Deputy Clerk Sater, would you call the roll on the recommendation for a continued effort to move forward on consolidation of rural fire districts in Johnson County? If you want to forward this recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, vote yes. If you decline to forward this, please vote no.
Thank you, Chair. Zach Thomas,
No.
Greg Smith,
Greg Smith, no.
Brenda Sharp,
Brenda Sharp, no.
Paula Swatch,
Paula Schwak, no.
Kyle Russell,
Al Russell, no.
Don Roberts,
Don Roberts, no.
Leslie Riverola,
Leslie Riverola, no.
Don Ratan,
Don Ratan is no.
Ed Peterson,
Ed Peterson, yes.
Eric Michelson,
Eric Michelson, no.
Joy Costin,
Joy Costin, no.
Laura Klinging Smith,
Laura Klinging Smith, yes.
Randy Hutchins,
Randy Hutchins, yes.
Tedrick House,
Tedrick House, no.
Jimmy Gaona,
Jimmy Gaona, no.
Jane Dirks,
Jane Dirks, no.
Jim Denning,
Jim Denning, yes.
Vicki Charlesworth,
Vicki Charlesworth, no.
Karen Brownlee,
Karen Brownlee, yes.
Mike Boehm,
Mike Boehm, no.
Wendy Bingesser,
Wendy Bingesser, yes.
And Chair Musel.
Chair votes no.
Chair, I have 6 yeses and 16 nos.
That recommendation fails to receive 13 votes. We will move on to the recommendation by Mayor Schwas. And Mayor, I apologize. I've pronounced your name about every way I could over 10 months, and I will never get it right. But
I take no offense.
I appreciate your patience.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. Recall that we received all these public comments, some of which said the Board of County Commissioners should not be acting as a quote check and balance on the sheriff's office, including the budgeting process. Given those comments, I want to say that I was a little surprised by the memo from staff, but I want to express my sincere appreciation to staff. Staff clarified that the sheriff's current budgeting process in most instances follows the guidance of the county's budget and financial planning department. The memo also clarified that the sheriff's office sometimes avails itself of the services of the county's procurement division. The approach that I've outlined is a somewhat different approach than the one that appears to me, based on the memo, to be currently standard practice. What I'm recommending is follows in line with the case law that says when the sheriff has a statutory duty, and that would be primarily the functioning of the jail, that the sheriff really has to be provided the funds he needs. On the other hand, there are many discretionary or non-statutory duties that are performed by the sheriff's office. And in those instances, the case law indicates that's why you've got a Board of County Commissioners that approves a budget. Because with regard to those items, there should be give and take, and there should be following of the general procedures that the Board of County Commissioners applies to every other kind of departmental function. Therefore, I have proposed this recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. I yield to the majority of my fellow charter commissioners if you feel that there's not enough distinction between the two approaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Comments on the proposed recommendation with respect to the sheriff's office and budgeting? We have discussed this before, so there doesn't have to be discussion today.
Mr. Chair, this is Jim Denning. May I be recognized?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I won't be supporting this. I doubt the county commissioners would want to touch this if it was even a recommendation. We've had this battle many times, and the sheriff's office, you know, it needs to act independently for many reasons. And I won't be supporting this, and I doubt that the county commissioners would want to touch this. This is third rail stuff.
Other comments from commissioners?
Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, this is Greg Smith.
Go ahead, Greg.
Just very simply, the same objections I had to the amendment that was overwhelmingly defeated when we voted on it. A clear statement of the statutory duties of the sheriff's office is in statute. The sheriff is responsible for more than the jail in statute. The sheriff is responsible for keeping the peace in the entire county. Deciding what's discretionary, I seriously doubt that that's something that the Board of County Commissioners wants to get into. The budgeting process is followed and follows statute, so I don't see any need to recommend what's already being done.
Other comments from commissioners? If not, we will move to a vote. If you support the proposed recommendation with respect to the sheriff and the budgeting, vote yes. If you oppose forwarding that to the county commissioners, vote no. Deputy Clerk Sater,
Joy Costin,
Joy Costin votes yes.
Laura Klinging Smith,
Laura Klinging Smith, no.
Randy Hutchins,
Randy Hutchins, no.
Tedrick House,
Tedrick House, no.
Jimmy Gaona,
Jimmy Gaona, no.
Jane Dirks,
Jane Dirks, no.
Jim Denning,
Jim Denning, no.
Vicky Charlesworth,
Charlesworth, yes.
Karen Brownlee,
Brownlee, no.
Mike Boehm,
Mike Bang, no.
Wendy Bingesser,
Wendy Bingesser, no.
Eric Michelson,
No.
Ed Peterson,
Peterson, yes.
Don Ratan,
Don Ratan, yes.
Leslie Riverola,
Leslie Riverola, no.
Don Roberts,
Don Roberts, no.
Kyle Russell,
Kyle Russell, yes.
Paula Swak,
Paula Schwak, yes.
Brenda Sharp,
Brenda Sharp, yes.
Greg Smith,
Greg Smith, no.
Zach Thomas,
Zach Thomas, no.
Chair Musel,
chair votes no.
Chair, I have 7 yeses and 15 nos.
That recommendation is not forwarded to the county commission. We'll move on to the recommendation proposed by Commissioner Hutchins on the unincorporated, I'm not sure what to call this, Randy, unincorporated structure.
Yeah, that's fine.
Floor is
Linda,
yours.
did you get the revision sent to you shortly before the meeting started?
Yes, we have it on the screen.
All right, very good.
Randy, just a minute, Randy, so this is different than what was in the packet?
That would be correct.
Okay.
I've got some last minute feedback from a commissioner I thought was worthy of incorporating in here. So last minute update. The update here that we put in streamlined language as well as help make it clear that there was not an ask for increase in taxes. This was simply a one-time ask coming from reserves as well as a reallocation of current spending. So it's not asking for an increase in taxes.
You have any other comments you want to make?
That's all I have.
Comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Denning. May I be recognized?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this language is probably coming from me. I worked on it a couple of days ago and didn't get it to Randy on time. I thought I did, but I did not. And I guess I would consider this a substitute recommendation because I made significant changes to the structure. And basically what I did, I wanted to see if we could get it as a recommendation. Randy put a lot of work into it. I think his original language was pretty binding and pretty strict. I think it left the intention of a recommendation more of an amendment. So what I did was I changed the language to make it certainly non-binding and more of a recommendation. I toned it down and just restructured it. I did put a fiscal note in there. Obviously, all elected officials, that's always their first question when you present testimony. They want to know what the fiscal note is. So I did leave the fiscal note in there, but again, I toned it down to a recommendation rather than a hard number. The other thing I did was I recommended that the Board of County Commissioner hear testimony on the unincorporated area in informal fashion. So interested parties could come in and testify. I think that is important. And then I was very clear that no tax increase is intended. It was to be used out of existing funds. So that's basically in a nutshell. I did make some significant changes, hoping to give it a chance to get onto a recommendation.
And Jim, I was favored with a copy of the red line, and basically for the rest of the commission, a lot of the words shall were changed to should. Is that a fair description of what you were trying to do to make it less mandatory and more recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I changed all the shalls to may and could. Again, in the legislative process, if you see the word shall, you get pretty nervous because it puts a lot of restrictions on it, and I wanted to stay in the recommendation phase.
Okay, any further comments, Randy?
No, I just appreciate the feedback Commissioner Denning provided me. It's very helpful.
Mr.
Comments
Chairman.
from commissioners, Mayor Bain.
Yes, this is different than the one I saw 2 days ago, and I appreciate the editing by Senator Denning. Can we take a 5-minute recess or at least pause for a minute and let us read what is before us, since it wasn't shared in advance? So we have an opportunity to actually know what we're voting on. And then Linda's going to have to scroll it on the screen at some point when it's time to break. But when she had it small, I couldn't read it. Now I can see it, but that's half the deal. So.
Linda,
could a link be placed in the chat or
something?
Linda, you weren't able to get this out in time to the full commission? I know not everybody has access maybe to their email too, but.
I was thinking we got it resent to the commissioners, but like you say, I think it was late. And I'm not for sure on this. I'm more than happy. I'll go ahead and forward it to everybody. And we can also, if you did want to take a break, I mean, we can leave this on the screen and we can get to the point of scrolling at a point that hopefully everyone can read it. So
Let me ask
Chair,
Commissioner Hutchins and Commissioner Denning, were you guys willing to have the red line shared with the commission? So that people.
Mr. Chairman, this is Denning. I would be fine with the red line. It just shows all the significant editing that was done.
Yes, I concur as well.
Linda, do you have that available so in a way you could PDF it to the commissioners, either in a link in the chat or by email?
I can send it by email. So this would be the one that came from Jim Denning, correct?
Correct. I think Mayor Bain's suggestion is a good one. This is different. We have spent a considerable amount of time on the commission with the concerns of the unincorporated area. I think we ought to try to make sure everybody understands what they would be recommending to the Board of County Commissioners. We typically take a break about this time anyway. It's 5:06. Just why don't we take 5 minutes for Linda to get that out and for folks to take a look at it at the red line. And then we'll come back at 5:12 p.m. We'll be back in open session in the meeting. Will that work for you, Linda?
Yes, it will. I just emailed it to all the Charter Commission members. So please, if you are not receiving it, please email me and I'll make sure I send it directly to you again.
Okay, let's take a break then for purposes of reading the revised recommendation on the unincorporated area, and also if anybody needs any other personal break. Plan to be back by 5:12. Linda, if you could also place on the screen the red line, that would be helpful to the public. I don't know if you have that available.
I'll try to get that. Hold on just a second.
Sure, sure.
Linda, I haven't received the email yet. Just arrived. Thank you.
You're welcome. Everyone may receive another one. I tried to send it just to make sure, so thank you. Bill Nixon has also tried to send the wording in the chat. So if some of you want to look that way.
It's too big.
I guess it was too big, so it's not working in the chat. Please look at your email.
I broke it up as much as possible in the chat.
Bill, were you providing the red line version or the clean version?
The clean version, since I can't do red line in the chat.
Okay.
But we're trying to get the red line up on the screen.
Beautiful.
And the red line should have come through on the email.
It did not in my email.
So what am I doing wrong?
It came through with lines in the margin where things had supposedly been changed, but it did not identify or show the changes.
This is Tedrick. I did get a red line.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, this is Leslie. I received one as well.
Okay. You're suggesting it's user error on my part, which would be fair?
Yeah, there's a view option in Word to show simple red line or complex red line. It's not called that, but if you go in the reviewing tab.
Okay. I have it from before, but I just wanted to make sure everybody else had the red line. And for members of the public, we are looking at a revision to a proposed amendment or proposed recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. And because of changes just made this afternoon, we're giving commission members a chance to look at the changes before we further discuss it and then vote on it.
And if you go into Word, if you pull it up, I have on the screen, you want to toggle from simple markup to all markup, and that should show you the full red line. And we're going to get that on the screen now.
Thank you, Bill. I'll remind commissioners, we have one more recommendation to consider and then some closing scheduling issues to accomplish by 6 o'clock. I have 5:12 PM, so let's go back and consider that we're back in public session. We never actually left. Are there comments on the red line that you've been able to review quickly since it was sent by the county staff?
Greg,
Sure,
Mayor
Mu-
Michelson.
Excuse me,
Michelson,
Chair
okay.
Musel, this is
Yes.
the chair. The red line version, we're getting ready to share, so we should be able to discuss the red line version in just a second. There we go.
Mayor Michelson, you have your hand up?
Yes. Thanks, Chair. Just reading on the fly here, but it looks like we're talking about a recommendation of a $50 million spend in year one, and then an increase of $2 million annually to come from unspecified other appropriations of existing spending. Boy, that's a lot of money. I'm not anywhere close to saying we need to spend that much money here. It may be more, it may be less, but and to suggest that it doesn't call for a tax increase strikes me as a bit disingenuous. That means that if it comes out of reserves, that will put pressure on for the next item that needs to come out of reserves and a tax increase ultimately, or you're going to be significantly reducing services in other areas, presumably the non-rural areas. And I don't know what those are. I don't know where those efficiencies can be achieved, and this doesn't purport to specify those. So I'm open to hearing, if this were something to the effect of, there are some issues with road maintenance in the unincorporated areas we'd like the board to look at. That would be one thing, but this level of specificity and this level of tens of millions of dollars of new spending, I'm not there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Other comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chair, this is Jim Denning.
Go ahead, Jim.
I went ahead and left that fiscal note in there just to, I guess, be transparent. Randy had put it in there as a shall spend, and I changed it to just a recommendation. I think if the county commission does want to hear testimony, the very first question they're going to ask is, what does this cost? And since Randy threw that figure out, I just left it in there. Certainly, you're not proposing anything more than that. I just know that everybody will ask that question, and it had been discussed, so I left it in. And I softened up the wording to make it a recommendation and a fiscal note. If they did take it up as a recommendation, that's what the proposed fiscal note would look like. Certainly not a recommendation to do some spending or any taxing.
Mr. Chair.
Mayor Boehm, and then Commissioner Peterson, and then Commissioner
you.
Klingensmith.
Thank you, Mike Boehm. Again, appreciate the efforts here. The $50 million was a number plucked out of the air as opposed to having any project identification or any allocation coming from reserves. Still is hitting the taxpayers of the cities as well as the rural area. I'd love to have a $50 million allocation to Lenexa to improve K-10 for capacity reasons. I understand there's safety issues in both of those conversations. and then it wants an increase every year thereafter. That can't come from reserves forever. I cannot support this as written. I appreciate the softening language. I think our county commission, I think our existing planning boards and staff do review capital improvement plans every year in the comp plan and look at these items, and they have to prioritize a limited amount of funds, and to just cut a piece out for certain populations in Johnson County is not just. So I will vote no.
Mr. Peterson?
Well, I would first comment that I think we're bordering on, if not entering into, telling the BOCC how to do their budgeting. And I don't think that's our role. I think our role is to look at structure of county government and operations rather than making these kinds of budgetary recommendations. Secondly, I'm not really convinced that the current budget is as inadequate as has been represented. There are plans, long-range 5-year plans for capital maintenance and repair in the unincorporated area, and those are reviewed annually. You know, I could make a similar claim that I think more money ought to be spent in the northeast part of the county than the county chooses to spend. And we have not heard the other side of this from the county, the public works people, about what the real situation is. We've heard one side of this, but not the other. And I also know that some of these issues like paved roads, oftentimes there are some residents on that road that want it paved, and there are others who would prefer to keep it as a dirt or gravel road. And for us, I think we would just need a lot more information than we have and that we've looked into to be able to make this stringent and detailed recommendation. So I'll be voting no on this particular item.
Commissioner Klingensmith and then Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Randy, I know that you've worked very, very hard on this, and I still am not sure I understand. Are you still taking the 21 elected township officials and consolidating them into one board?
No, what we're simply doing is utilizing the existing structure as in place today and giving them an opportunity to bring forth what they believe, you know, the people of their elected trustee district is forth to the Planning and Development Commission, which will ultimately roll up to the Board of County Commissioners. So there's absolutely no changes being made. We're just simply trying to leverage the existing you know, elected trustees in that process.
So they would still remain, so we'd still have the 21 elected officials who would be part of this planning process.
That's correct. Bottom line is they'll have more of a voice than what they've had in the past.
Okay. So in this process, are you saying that they would be responsible for this budget of 50 million, or is that still going to be at the county level, at the BOCC level?
It would be at the Board of County Commissioners level. What they would do is they would bring within their elected district, they would bring their priorities of what they would like to see done in the unincorporated area, and then working through the collaborative effort with the Planning and Development Commission. They would all work together to try to come up with a overall unincorporated wide prioritization and make that recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners.
But currently they're not doing this, these elected officials.
Currently, they are not.
Right, and I bring that up is, as I've stated before, my husband is the treasurer for Aubrey Township. And this is something he does not want to deal with. And he's responsible for maintaining the sirens, paying the school crossing guards, all of those different things in Aubrey Township. And I've discussed this with him, and he does not want this responsibility whatsoever. So what happens when all of a sudden these elected officials have to take on this responsibility that they have never had to take on before, because he won't run again then? I mean, then you've got to start finding 21 people to run, to manage the roads that right now, when in our area of the unincorporated area, when we have an issue with the roads, a simple phone call to Johnson County, and we've never really had an issue with getting roads repaved or things in that nature.
So that hasn't been our experience in the other parts of the county. If your husband so chooses not to participate in the process, that is his prerogative. And so I don't know what more I could say from that aspect, but I do know that there are other trustees that are very much interested. They feel like they do have issues. They hear it from the people within their unincorporated areas, and they very much want an elevated voice in the process.
Commissioner Thomas.
Perhaps I read this differently than everyone else. Is that $50 million allocation a requirement in this recommendation? Or when I read it as a consideration that it gives the Board of County Commissioners the ability to think about or flesh out this idea further?
That would be a consideration. As Commissioner Denning pointed out, we need a starting point. So when I met with Brian Pedig of Public Works, he had between 70 and $90 million worth of projects that he felt were ones that needed to be done. So this number here, we felt like was a good starting point to start the discussions and trying to, fix some immediate needs that are out there. And then the incremental annual budget would be tried to continually improve beyond that. But again, it's not a mandate. It's a starting point for the Board of County Commissioners to start the discussion.
And I think that last part is why I like this idea, given my history out in the rural areas, as well as the research and presentations you put in. Something needs to be done to address that. And as a starting point, it doesn't hold anybody's feet to the fire, and I will support this for that reason. Thank you.
Commissioner Riverola, and then Commissioner Coaston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate Commissioner Klingensmith's comments, particularly as someone who lives in an area that would be impacted by this, and with a spouse who actually serves as an unincorporated trustee right now in a township. I really appreciate hearing his position and your thoughts. For many of the reasons that have already been stated, which I won't repeat, I am absolutely not in favor of this. But I guess I don't read the language the same as it relates to the tax increase. It specifically states that this would not result in a tax increase on the incorporated areas, but moving and reallocating dollars that would otherwise go to populated areas. You can call it anything you want, but at the end of the day, that impacts those of us that are actually paying these bills. And there's not a circumstance in which I can support that. Additionally, I find this language about not having their annual budget adjusted to reflect any federal or state funding that they might receive to be particularly concerning as well. So I do not support this, and I intend to vote no.
Commissioner Coaston.
Thank you, Chairman Musil. So Randy, I really do appreciate that you brought this forward and worked on it so hard. I wonder if the language that is outlining the monetary exposure to the county and taxpayers is something that can be struck from the document, leaving it more ambiguous as to how they might go about thinking about allocating dollars and the funding of those initiatives. Is it imperative that we give them that framework and say, this is the starting point? Or is this just an opportunity to have a conversation with the commissioners about the needs that you see are so important to the people that you serve?
And that's a great question. And from my perspective, at this point in time, it's not as much about the dollars as it is about the process, having the opportunity to bring them forth, and then having the opportunity to then quantify them in terms of what it is, the dollars. So if you ask me, it's more about the process than what the actual dollars are themselves. I don't know what the right number should be, but I felt like it was important that we at least had a starting point and people could start having that discussion.
Thank you. I too have concerns about the allocation of funds. So that does make me uncomfortable, but I certainly can appreciate where you're coming from, and all of your hard work has been really impressive. So I hate to see this fail because of a dollar amount that's been stipulated. So that seems to be the sticky point for everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner Housh.
Yeah, I guess I come back to thinking what Commissioner Peterson said, that we're really just taking up a budgeting advice suggestion for the county, and that's really not our purpose. I understand this is a recommendation, not an amendment, but I just think there are so many different constituencies that have needs with respect to infrastructure and other things while I really do appreciate Randy calling out this subject for discussion, I don't think that they're overlooked to the extent that we need to point them out over every other constituency. They may have specific needs. So I, again, appreciate the effort, but I'm opposed to recommending this to the Board of County Commissioners.
Commissioner Roberts.
Randy, thanks for all your work, and Commissioner Denning, I appreciate both of you working on this. And I want to speak from my standpoint of this, which is the mayor of Edgerton, and really the county does a good job at maintenance of what they have overall, and they do plan that out over years. But especially in areas like Randy brought up in this is around the intermodal or even growing cities, it would be beneficial for the county to take a serious look at those areas and how they can invest properly to not just assist in the growth, but also deal with the growth that is happening in that increased traffic patterns from incorporated areas to unincorporated areas, and even not just from incorporated areas, but even the growth in our rural unincorporated areas today. The population out there or the density of our unincorporated areas continue to grow as well. Also, I would say that I think it's important that we recognize that there are things that have been talked about in Johnson County as of recently, like solar farms that would add a different type of traffic pattern to the unincorporated areas, that, you know, that capital improvement spend could be needed more in the future, depending on what the county decides, than it's ever been needed, because it affects people's life. I'd also say that in my area, we see quite a bit of agritourism on certain roads that are gravel roads that could improve with an investment by the county. I like the concept of what you have here, Randy and Jim, a lot. And I would like to somehow say, the county needs to take a better look at it. And so this document says that, and it doesn't force the commissioner's hands to do anything necessarily, but it at least makes them look at what is being invested in the rural areas, and gives, you know, I'll comment back even on the trustees. The trustees are the closest in the area. What happens in Aubrey Township may be different than what happens in Gardner Township or McCamish Township. So, you know, including those in the process helps the county make a better plan based on area as well. So I will actually be supporting this today to try to get this in front of the BOCC.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't see any other hands up. Are there other comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, this is Denning again.
Yep.
I would make the recommendation to Randy that he strikes that paragraph that discusses the fiscal note. If this recommendation does pass and he has a chance to give testimony, he can answer, that will be one of the first questions that he will get asked, and he can throw it out then. But if that paragraph is going to keep some people from voting, or I would just recommend that he strikes that entire paragraph. Because like the mayor said, if he really just wants some testimony to make his case about the unincorporated area. And again, I would recommend that he just strike that whole paragraph.
If he did that, I'm trying to figure out then what does the recommendation really say? I guess, Randy, that's up to you as to whether or not you want to take out all the dollar amounts.
If we could go back down to where it was, right. Based on the feedback, my thought is where it says, starts with this recommendation includes consideration of a one-time allocation of $50 million from the county reserves and increases of 2 million, see if the errors over 3 million from the average. Recommendations, tax increases. I think that we can take out from the point that it says this recommendation includes a consideration and go all the way down to where it says recommendation at their discretion, right, basically to where the yellow starts. I would be in favor of striking that, because in the end of the day, the commission's correct. We're not, there's nothing that's forcing anybody to spend that amount of money. So I would have no problem in deleting that.
Let's not delete that now. I don't know if that's Bill Nixon doing that. Let's leave that in and leave it grayed. The difficulty I'm having here is that this recommendation started as an amendment. It has morphed a number of times, both before and after the deadline that we tried to impose on the recommendation. I don't know whether to put it to a vote to allow it to be amended, or what the appropriate procedure would be. Randy, from the start, you have always had numerical dollar figures in your recommendation. It seems like that was the point of your presentation early on, was the dollar amounts. And I'm concerned about now asking the commission to vote on something that has no dollar amount in it.
Well, so let's back up. So my original ask was an amendment. This is no longer amendment, it's recommendation, which obviously is very different. The amendment, you needed something very specific of which the public could vote on. Now that we're looking at taking something to the Board of County Commissioners, it's not a mandate of any dollars whatsoever. It's really, it's recommending that we initiate a process that evaluates the needs in the unincorporated area, comes with a prioritization of them, and hand to them what they believe needs to be done. And then the price tag would follow thereafter. So that's where, at this point in time, when we're looking at a recommendation, it's completely different than an amendment. I'm comfortable with that.
And I appreciate that. What I'm concerned about is that we had a recommendation form and deadline, and we've had multiple changes to that. I see Eric Michelson has his hands up, and I will ask for the mayor's comments, but I think what I'm going to ask Randy to do is to move to amend it, to strike that and see if the amendment passes. And then we'll move to a vote on the recommendation in whatever form. Mayor Michelson.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I've heard this then described as just a recommendation to look at it, but I still have concern that in the recommendation itself, unamended as it sits in front of us today, is a recommendation to appropriate additional existing monies from the general fund, reserves, and public works. So while the $50 million is no longer specified, unless that upper recommendation, Randy, is also changed to something that says to look at it versus to spend additional monies from these other areas, which again means you're either raising taxes or you're reducing services in other areas. And I don't know where, and again, other than that, those would be from incorporated areas, I don't know where those monies would come from. So I would still have concerns, even if the amendment you described was made for that reason.
Mayor Boehm?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mike Boehm speaking. This started out as a amendment proposal to add voters to the board to represent these unincorporated areas. It has morphed into a service delivery that's been amended, and we're amending while we're speaking on something that was delivered 5 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago to most of us, and 2 hours ago. I think that the criticism that they need to, the suggestion that we have a structured hearing for these types of things is already available. This current CIP planning process, the budgeting process, the county are public hearings with public comment opportunities. That's being done or made available to folks now. I don't see that we need to go recommend that they do that because that's already built within the structure. If no one's coming to testify, a statement from us isn't going to change that. I think once again, we are getting into details that probably aren't within our purview. And probably more importantly, getting into daily processes that the commission already has the power to do and frankly has been doing with the public process of developing CIPs and spending money and the budget. I also have the same concerns that Mayor Michelson has, Commissioner Michelson, regarding the fact that there's still money discussed, even if not specific, and that becomes somewhat parochial. So my position hasn't changed, and at some point, if I'm allowed, I'm saying call the question on what was before us as opposed to what's amended. Thank you.
Well, if the question has been called, we can debate whether to call the question and have a motion on that. Are you calling the question, Mayor Boehm? We've tried to be less formal than that, but we are approaching 5:40 in the afternoon. So are you asking for the question to be called on the recommendation contained in the red line?
I think that's what we had when we all read the document. To continue to amend it on the fly is not good process. So yes.
Is there discussion on the call of the question before we vote on whether or not to call the question and vote on the recommendation red line as presented during the meeting? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. If you want to conclude discussion and debate on the recommendation as on the screen now, you will vote yes. If you want to continue that discussion, which would likely include an amendment, vote no. If the yes
Can you
votes
say that?
prevail.
Say that again, please.
If you want to stop the debate and vote on what is on the screen, or if you want to stop the debate on what is on the screen and move to a vote, vote yes. If you want to continue the debate, which I would then ask for a motion to amend this to strike that paragraph. If you want to continue that discussion with an amended recommendation, vote no. That makes sense to everyone? Linda, would you please call the roll? Again, a yes vote would terminate debate, and then we would vote on what is in front of us.
Chair, can I clarify as the clerk that this would be just voting whether we're going to stop the debate? Is that correct?
Correct. If the yes votes prevail on that, we will then move to a vote on the recommendation that's in front of us.
Okay. Wendy Bingesser.
Wendy Bingesser, yes.
Mike Boehm.
Mike Boehm, yes.
Karen Brownlee.
Brownlee, no.
Vicky Charlesworth.
Charlesworth, yes.
Jim Denning.
Denning, no.
Jane Dirks.
Jane Dirks, no.
Jimmy Gaona.
Jimmy Gaona, yes.
Tedrick House.
Tedrick House, yes.
Randy Hutchins.
Randy Hutchins, no.
Laura Clinging Smith,
Laura Clinging Smith, yes.
Joy Costin,
Joy Costin, yes.
Eric Michelson,
Eric Michelson, yes.
Ed Peterson,
Ed Peterson, yes.
Don Rattan,
Dawn Rattan, yes.
Leslie Riverola,
Leslie Riverola, yes.
Don Roberts,
And to clarify one more time, Chair, this is a vote just to stop debate.
Correct.
So Don Roberts, yes.
Kyle Russell,
Kyle Russell, yes.
Paula Swatch,
Paula Schwak, yes.
Brenda Sharp,
Brenda Sharp, yes.
Greg Shelton. I'm sorry. He's absent. Sorry about that. Greg Smith,
Greg Smith, no.
Zach Thomas,
Zach Thomas, no.
Chair Musel,
Chair votes yes.
Chair, we have 16 yeses and 6 nos.
We will then proceed to vote on the recommendation in the red line version on the screen, which you received by email. A yes vote would be to forward this recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. A no vote would mean you do not want to forward it to the county commissioners as a recommendation. Would you call the roll?
Eric Michelson,
Eric Michelson, no.
Ed Peterson,
Ed Peterson, no.
Don Rattan, Don Rattan,
Sorry, I couldn't come off mute. No. No.
thank you. Leslie Riverola,
Leslie Riverola, no.
Don Roberts,
Don Roberts, yes.
Kyle Russell,
Kyle Russell, no.
Paula Swatch,
Paula Schwak, no.
Brenda Sharp,
Brenda Sharp, no.
Greg Smith,
Greg Smith, yes.
Zach Thomas,
Zach Thomas, yes.
Wendy Bingesser,
Wendy Bingesser, no.
Mike Boehm,
Mike Boehm, no.
Karen Brownlee,
Karen Brownlee, yes.
Vicky Charlesworth,
Vicky Charlesworth, no.
Jim Denning,
Jim Denning, yes.
Jane Dirks,
Jane Dirks, yes.
Jimmy Gaona,
Jimmy Gaona, no.
Tedrick House,
Hedrick House, no.
Randy Hutchins,
Randy Hutchins, yes.
Laura Clinging Smith,
Laura Clinging Smith, no.
Joy Costin,
Joy Costin, no.
Chair Musel,
Chair votes no.
Chair, I have 7 yeses, 15 nos.
That recommendation fails. We're going to move to the next agenda item. This is a recommendation submitted by Commissioner Kyle Russell in light of the vote on the Board of County Commission compensation. Frankly, my first thought and my discussion with Commissioner Russell, was that we would first have a vote to see whether we'd consider it because it came in after the deadline. I think given all of the recommendations that have been changed and amended since the deadline, absent strong objection from commission members and a desire to vote on whether we hear this, I'm going to simply allow Mr. Russell to present it and then we will discuss it and vote on it. Do I hear objection to that? Commissioner Russell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate everyone's consideration in bringing this up. As my email that was in the agenda packet said, I probably would have brought this forward as a recommendation at the last meeting had I done my due diligence and communicated with Mayor Michelson and had known that he was not planning to do that, just because he had carried the laboring oar on several other things. But I will let him speak for himself, but I do think he continues to support the concept. I don't want to take up too much time with this. We discussed it at 2 other meetings and voted on it as an amendment. It got 11 votes, I think, as an amendment, probably came in closer than any other amendment proposal to passing. And this is something that without a charter amendment, the county commissioners are going to have to fix themselves by raising their own pay. That is always a tough, gutsy thing to do, regardless of your political persuasion. So I think a formal recommendation to them that they do that and do it fixed on an ongoing basis, modestly among Mayor Michelson originally introduced one version, and then he introduced a lesser version, which is the version that I'm suggesting we adopt as a formal recommendation. I think encouraging them as a recommendation to do that on an ongoing basis will help bolster their will and hopefully allow them the courage to fix this problem on their own. That's about it. The recommendations there before you.
Thank you. Comments on Commissioner Russell's proposed recommendation? We're wearing everybody out. We have had lengthy discussion on this.
This is Tedrick, and I again appreciate the effort and do think this one was close. I guess my thought is, as a recommendation, it just asks the commissioners to have the courage to, do something that was sort of the premise of the concern in the first place. In that, if we recommended to it, we're leaving it to them, and that was the point of the amendment. But I think it's an issue. I won't repeat what I've said before, so I just thought I'd point that out.
Commissioner Sharp.
I would just comment that I do plan to support this in visiting with many women and lower wage workers about getting engaged civically and running for office. Frequently, the ability to do that and leave their other paying work in order to make this significant time commitment is a hindrance. So I do plan to support it.
Thank you. Other comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, this is Denning.
Go ahead, Jim.
Obviously, this is a much smaller number than the previous unincorporated recommendation, but again, it was noted that we shouldn't be interfering with any kind of budget process, but here we are on a much smaller scale, though, trying to influence an appropriation and probably a small tax increase to cover it. So, it's a much smaller basis, but we were just criticized for doing it on the unincorporated recommendation. And now we're doing it here very next amendment.
If I may respond to that quickly, Mr. Chair, I would just point out that the most that the county commissioners would be recommended to raise their own pay here would be the average budgeted. It would not ever exceed the average budgeted increase percentage for all county employees. So I appreciated Mayor Michelson putting that in the first version, and I think that makes it in line with what we pay our employees at most, and would avoid a tax increase unless we're increasing taxes to pay everybody more and the county commission decides to do that.
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, Mayor Baines speaking. This is not doing anything other than giving 25 voices, which could be 9, 13, 5, 25. It doesn't matter. They have the authority to do this now. As Senator Commissioner Denning said, we're meddling in budget issues and small things that really should not be within our purview, I will continue to vote no. Thank you.
Any other comments? I will make my final comments. I think this is within our purview to make this as a recommendation. I still think it is unnecessary. And I've been an elected official that actually had some compensation as a city council member and had the courage or stupidity to vote for it myself. I think we should allow our county commissioners to do the same. I don't think they need this recommendation, and I will oppose it, but I understand that there's support for it, and I appreciate, Kyle, you're bringing it forward as a recommendation. If there are no further comments, Linda, would you call the roll? A yes vote would be to forward this recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners as part of our final report. A no vote would be to not recommend it.
Are you ready, Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Wendy Bengeser,
Wendy Bengesser, no.
Mike Boehm,
Boehm, no.
Karen Brownlee,
Brownlee, no.
Vicky Charlesworth,
Yes. Vicky Charlesworth, yes.
Jim Denning,
Denning votes no.
Jane Dirks,
Jane Dirks, no.
Jimmy Gaona,
Jimmy Gaona, no.
Tedrick House,
Tedrick House, no.
Randy Hutchins,
Randy Hutchins, yes.
Laura Clinging Smith, Laura Clinging Smith.
I think she had to drop off.
Okay, thank you. Joy Costin,
Joy Costin, yes.
Brent McCune is absent. Eric Michelson,
Eric Michelson, yes.
Ed Peterson,
Ed Peterson, yes.
Don Ratan,
John Ratan is yes. Yes.
Leslie Riverola,
Leslie Riverola is no.
Don Roberts,
Don Roberts, no.
Kyle Russell,
Kyle Russell, yes.
Paula Swak,
Paula Schwank, yes.
Brenda Sharp,
Brenda Sharp, yes.
Greg Smith,
Greg Smith, no.
Zach Thomas,
Zach Thomas, yes.
Chair Musel,
Chair votes no.
Chair, I have 10 yeses, 11 nos.
That recommendation fails to receive the 13 votes to be forwarded to the county commission. We are done with all votes on amendments and recommendations. Looking back at the agenda, we need to establish a deadline for submission of minority reports. I have drafted and had reviewed by the executive committee and by county staff for administrative matters, a draft final report, which I will circulate to the full commission. I had one volunteer that said they'd help me review it beyond the executive committee. But it wasn't a flood of folks. So I'm just going to send it out to everybody so that we can look at it at our February 14th meeting. If there are major changes or concerns or amendments, my plan is that we will schedule a February 16th meeting, which would simply be to approve the final report. If we can approve it on February 14th, we'd have to suspend our rules. Our rules said it would be presented one meeting and then voted on the next meeting. So I'll try to get it out in time that anybody can submit comments or questions or edits, and we'll see how many of those there are. I've intended it to be a factual recitation of what we did, what amendments and recommendations we considered, what the vote was on those. And with Linda's able help, we are going to attempt to list by date the meetings a particular amendment or recommendation was discussed. Part of that is an effort so that the 2031 Charter Commission actually has a record it can review and maybe not have to plow all the ground that we plowed this time. So that's the plan on the final report draft. With respect to minority reports, there's no requirement that a certain number of people submit a minority report, but I do think it would be fair to the full commission if we had a deadline to get those minority reports in before our February 14th meeting. So I'm open to suggestions, but my initial suggestion would be to get those in by Monday, February 7th, so that they can be circulated to the commission. Any thoughts or comments on that schedule?
Mr. Chair, was there a format for minority reports in the 2010, or I'm sorry, 2020, 2011 work group?
I'm going to look back at it. I think they're just called minority reports and no format in particular.
I just didn't know if we would need to have a page limit or a certain type of structure like the forms that we've been using for amendments and recommendations, for instance.
Well, I'm certainly, I guess I don't know if I think some type of page limit would be appropriate. But I don't know necessarily what that would be because I don't know what the scope of the minority reports would be.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, yes.
this is Greg Smith. I've looked back over all of the past charter commissions, including 1976 when it didn't pass. All of them have had a minority report that's of a few pages. The formats are somewhat the same. It's just kind of an overview, and there were certain commissioners that may have commented on things that they wished had been advanced that weren't advanced, that type of thing.
Yeah, there are 6 pages in the 2011 report. Oh, that's wrong. Yeah, there are about 10 pages of minority report for the 2011 Charter Commission report that are full pages, probably 10 or 11 point font. I think at this point, we don't have anything in our rules that requires a format or a page limit. I would ask anybody first of all, nobody has to submit a minority report. I would ask for the discretion and deference of those submitting them to keep them shorter rather than longer. And as a personal matter, I would think if there is a minority report on an issue that wasn't raised during the commission or the subject of an amendment or a recommendation, I guess I'm curious as to why it would be in a minority report if nobody raised it during the discussion. But I'm not going to impose that kind of limitation. I think at this point, without objection, we will ask any minority reports to be submitted by close of business on February 7th, so they can be circulated to commission members and reviewed, and we can have discussion and comment on them at the February 14th meeting. Linda, I believe you indicated from the doodle poll that February 16 worked for a significant majority of the commission. Am I right in remembering that?
Yes, that is correct.
With respect to both February 14th and February 16th, we don't know at this point whether we will be holding those by Zoom. The Board of County Commissioners is going to revisit its decision, I believe, on February 17th. So the likelihood is that we will hold our February 14th and our February 16th meetings virtually as well. But we will save the decision on that until we get closer and see the circumstances. Any questions or comments from any commissioner before I ask for a motion to adjourn?
Chair, this is the clerk. Dawn Ratan did put in the chat to everyone. She would like to see a form or a format, especially referencing the section of the charter. That was her statement.
I think it would be fair to say a minority report should be broken into individual topics, how the charter addresses it and how the charter maybe should address it based on the minority report thinking. Again, we didn't establish rules, so I'm not going to try to ad hoc create those things, and I'm going to trust the discretion of the commission members. We've worked well as a commission. I would hope that we could keep that civility and responsibility going with respect to minority reports. So without objection, February 7th at close of business, Linda, would you please send out a reminder of that? We've not been good, and I've not been good at enforcing deadlines. I think it has worked out okay, but we'll try to be pretty strict on that one. With that, do I hear a motion?
Yes, sir, I will.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Kyle Russell, I'll move to adjourn.
Moved by Commissioner Russell. Do I hear a second?
Jane Dirk, second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dirks. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay very loudly so we can know who you are. All right. Thank you all very much. The meeting is adjourned. See you February
you.
14th.